Yes, it is.
Mr. Cook, this is Rex Bear with Lead Project. I got your email. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Now, I don't know if the phone shows up unavailable. It's because I'm calling on Skype. So just so you know, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But I read through your email and I was just like, wow, this is wonderful. It would be an honor to speak with you. Would you be interested in doing a show with us?
Absolutely.
That'd be
Are
great.
there are you aware of how many planets? Well, I read in the article that you weren't aware of how many planets that this second sun has. The second sun has seven of its own planets.
I've heard that before.
Okay. Um, you realize this came around during the time of Noah.
Is that what they referred to then in the biblical prophecies?
Yes. As a matter of fact, if you look in Revelations, it is known as wormwood. The Sumerians called it, of course, the destroyer. There's a lot more to it. I used to be on a co-host for a radio station where angels fear to tread on Crusade Radio with a person, Doug Millar, and we worked with former FBI head of the Los Angeles branch of the FBI, Ted Gunderson, in uncovering a lot of satanic worship and a lot of people involved in child trafficking, the stuff that's coming out now in New York, how they just rounded up over 300 people doing that stuff. But basically, I worked for MIT down in Boston. I worked on quite a few satellite projects, Astro C, Astro D, and what you call Chandra. Chandra used to be known as what is known as AXAF. I designed helped design the focal array. I was a mechanical designer for MIT, and I worked also on SOHO, Solar Heliospherical Observatory, and SDO, Solar Dynamic Observatory, both satellites to study the sun. One's parked in an orbit that's gravitationally equal between the Earth and the sun, which is SOHO, and it's parked in that permanent orbit. I worked on the LASCO portion of that satellite. But I also worked on SDO, Solar Dynamic Observatory. I worked at Goddard Space Flight Center, except my role was to design all the harness and cables to hook it to the ground test equipment so we could verify that the science was correct on it. And I documented the engineering unit on those. So I'm also up on a lot of stuff going on with Nibiru and the biblical implications of what Nibiru is and what it represents to mankind and to the earth, and the stuff that's coming upon us. We're beginning to see it now, and a lot of things you covered in your article, I was really impressed with, or your YouTube video. The fact that you understood this electrical exchange between the two planets, because a lot of people still believe that the sun is fusion or fission, and that's not the case. It's electrical dynamic in nature. So, yeah, I I wouldn't mind discussing these things with you. But what do you know of the Nephilim?
Okay, so the Nephilim obviously have been talked about in biblical prophecies and scripture, and there's a lot of speculation how big they are. And I know a decent amount. I've talked to L.A. Marzulli a couple of times, actually several times, and enough to discuss them. Absolutely.
Okay, now are you familiar with the Book of Enoch
Yes, the Book of
or Enoch?
Enoch, 100%. Yeah, the Watchers.
Okay, exactly. Well, the Watchers were specified that they actually came to Earth from the seventh planet of Nibiru, or Nibiru. Some people call it Nibiru. I call it Nibiru. But the bottom line is, if you follow the biblical prophecy, the number seven equates to, you've heard the term seventh heaven. But the bottom line is that Nibiru is where the Anunnaki come from, or the Watchers. And basically, this all ties back to scientific stuff I worked on. Basically, I worked on the satellites that actually showed Nibiru coming in. The LASCO portion of that satellite, which was featured in the movie 2012, in the first, I think, 15, 20 minutes to show film clips from the LASCO portion, which is to study mass coronal ejections, or the CMEs, coronal mass ejections from the planet. And I also worked on that focal array too. So basically, the satellites I worked on actually proved that Nibiru is coming in because they've actually are on those photographs, which NASA has since scrubbed. But even Hubble was being used to watch its approach, and it was locked and sealed, so nobody can get into it except for certain scientists. So NASA's now coming out and beginning to confirm this, but it's like, wow, it's too late to protect most of the people on the face of the earth. And you're well aware of the globalist plan to depopulate the earth, and the bottom line is this is just part of it all. So I've been watching this thing very closely, and from a scientific point, I studied the things about Nibiru for a good 3 years before I even started to release information on it, even on our radio show. But when I did, it started getting out there, and people started waking up to it. And being the fact that I worked on and off for NASA since 1988, kind of drove home the point that this is no joke and could be quite dangerous for the planet. It is going to be quite dangerous for this planet.
What you shared with me, can I put this on the record?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is some very intense information, and Ted Gunderson, it was in 97 that he exposed the chemtrail/weather war agenda, correct?
Correct. He also uncovered what's coming out now. I don't know if you know, the Queen of England has an arrest warrant out for child pedophilia, and the death of, I think it was about 20 Native children. We did this on our show from Canada, and they were using for ritualistic sacrifice, satanic ritual sacrifice. It's all part of the New World Order and the covering up of the information about Nibiru, and the fact that NASA was hiding information about the approach of Nibiru. But also, it came down to they believe, well, they are satanic, so their destruction of the population is part of the satanic movement. But what this all boiled down to is that Ted Gunderson, who was part of our organization, which is Unite for Justice, we're very much following all these accounts and things that are going on. And we've tied it all together to realize that everything that's going on now, except for Trump, he's a wild card. Everything that's going on now was basically written in the Bible of things that would transpire, and especially in Revelations, as per the large hailstones that will hit the earth, all these not black holes, but the solar holes. I can't think of the name. The sunspots are basically the more occurrence of those, the greater weather changes and earthquakes, which you pointed out in your information, is being caused on the earth, plus HAARP being used to cause devastation. I think the chemtrails actually go back to them trying to obscure the sky enough so we don't see what's really coming. And it will obscure a lot of these things before they hit the earth and cause a greater toll of life lost on this planet. As you know, as the earth spins, there's a bulge of water at the equator. So if the earth gets knocked off its hinges or its axes, that water's got to go someplace. So that means a lot of the coastal cities are going under, big time. And depending upon where the earth comes back up on its axis will depend where that bulge of water will reform. And some are talking about the earth not rotating for a couple of days. So there's a lot that I've discovered in my journey, and along with Unite for Justice and Ted Gunderson, that all pertains to all these end time events that we are coming into. And a lot of the instruments I worked on, AXAF, which is now, you know it as Chandra, I helped develop that focal array for that. And you're talking, Chandra is an X-ray telescope. And basically, you have to bend the X-rays in a certain way in order to get them onto the focal plane, which is a good distance from the lens itself, which is actually not really a lens. It's just a way to.
We lost you. Are you there?
Yeah, what happens is the lens on Aksaf, which is actually now called Chandra, and you understand where the name Chandra came from. Chandra is the Indian goddess. Okay, so you get the connections.
It happened again. We got dropped again. This is this is hilarious.
Okay, where'd you lose me?
I'll tell you, you must have been talking about something pretty interesting for these guys to do it twice in a row. I mean, we get into some real controversial topics here, but.
Well, they used to do it to our program all the time.
Okay,
and,
so they did. They did it to your
times.
program all the time when you were with Ted?
Yep. Well, Ted had already passed away by the time I joined the group. Well, no, actually, I spoke to him on a couple occasions, but I was brought into Unite for Justice and the Crusade radio program where Angels Fear the Tread by Doug Millar, who was great friends with him. My sister was friends with his daughter, and she had actually traveled to Israel, where she stayed with her in Israel. But so I've been in this organization. I've been part of MIT Center for Space Research, and I've been up on this conspiracy stuff since then. As a matter of fact, MIT got quite PO'd at me for doing the things I was doing, but I had to keep on keeping on because, we're in danger. So, but to get back to Chandra, it costs $90,000 just to machine it. And what it does is there's a certain way that focal ray is designed to focus X-rays. If you were to take an X-ray and put a 45 degree and expect it to bounce off that 45 degree and then go to the imager, it wouldn't do it. It'll pass right through that object. So you have to deflect the X-ray in a certain way to get it to go to the focal point on the satellite. And I helped design the focal array so it would do that. It was actually designed by an engineering person that I was working with. And they couldn't conceptualize it. They couldn't put it down on paper, so that the machine shop, which was done by, I think it was Boston University, I want to say, they had a 5-axis machine that they machined it with. But basically, what you have to do is you have to kind of like deflect the X-ray. You can't directly. You have to. It's hard to explain. The array itself was an incredibly complex piece of machining actually that actually helped develop it. But the AXAF was only one part of it. And I thought AXAF was supposed to be searching for sources of certain X-rays because only certain types of X-rays will escape a black hole. Originally, I thought that's what they were going to use it for looking way out into the universe. But actually, that's not what they were going to use it for, as now that a lot of images come in of Nibiru. But both, you have to ask yourself this question. Now, I worked on SDO about 2005, but before that, I worked on SOHO back in the late 80s. Now, SOHO is a really great piece of equipment, and SDO is even greater in its clarity. But you got to ask yourself, why did they design 2 satellites to study the sun, unless they designed those satellites specifically for the approach of Nibiru? I mean, one would be enough. I mean, the science coming from both of them is astronomical. So there's the reasoning, I think, behind that is because so many things are taking place with the sun that they're really trying to choreograph, and I don't know if that's a proper word for it, choreograph what is going to happen to the sun. Even the axis of the sun is tilting because of Nibiru. So there's a lot of things going on that they're just trying to blame on global warming, and the people who are aware as you and I are, as to the extent of what's going on, understand that we're going to have a life-changing event in our faces in a very short period of time.
Did they give you some safe zones?
Well, not necessarily. Basically, just the fact that they're scrubbing everything from LASCO to portion of SDO to SOHO to our space telescope tells you that they're not going to allow this information out. And I don't, because of them, I think it's the upper echelons of the administration that are doing this. And I believe they're being governed by what they can and can't say because of the purse string type of scenario being used against them. In other words, you keep your mouth shut or you won't get any more funds from us. And MIT, when I was there, they were being threatened too, because it was during the Clinton administration. And let's just say this, I ended up in the hospital for a week.
Would they poison you or something?
Yep, they did. It almost killed me. An assassin was sent to take me out. And it did happen. And here's what happened. A guy dressed in a military uniform with an old Army jacket, bombardier jacket on, with the old Army Air Corps emblem on. He was dressed outside of his history for what he was trying to do. And I picked it up instantly because I'm an air buff, a World War II air buff. So I questioned him on the jacket. I said, isn't that the old Army Air Corps emblem? And I put it that way specifically. But when I got off the train to go to MIT in Boston in the morning, he got off in front of me and he stood to the left. And if you know North Station in Boston, you walk down to the end of the ramp, of course, to get out. But he stepped to the left and I was going right. And as I went right, I got hit in the arm with a dart, with a wooden dart. And I pulled that dart out of my flesh, and it was about ½ inch long. He delivered it with some sort of an air device or something. What happened was it gave me a certain type of septicemia, and my arm started swelling up. And the doctor told me, he says, if that's all I never got to my heart, I'd be dead. Now, the only person in the position to deliver that dart was this man who stepped off into the left. And you know how there's a body count around the Clintons. Well, they weren't too happy about a lot of the things that I was talking about. And I think that was the reason behind appointing Deutsch, the head of the CIA during that time, because he used to be the head of the chemistry department at MIT. And they hired him pretty much to try and silence me. That's what I think. I mean, I could be wrong on that, but why they went to him to appoint him to the head of the CIA just kind of blows my mind. And I was working with a police officer at that same time from the Oklahoma City bombing, and we were gathering the information together. He worked at Tulsa, at the Tulsa Police Department, and he was a master police officer and investigator and helicopter pilot for the Tulsa Police Department. Craig Roberts. He also wrote the book A Sniper's View of Daily Plaza. He also wrote the Medusa File. Well, he and I were involved in gathering as much information we could on the Oklahoma bombing and passing it on to the FBI and debunking the original or the story to the bombing. And I don't know if you're familiar with General Pardon, Brigadier General Pardon, who also said that the bombs were placed inside the building because of the way the building went down. General Pardon's career in the Air Force was to build bunker buster bombs. So when he investigated the bombing of the Murray building, he discovered that the only way that could have happened is with shake charges taken out the columns, because some of the columns that were taken out were further away from where the bomb blast was. And he said that the bomb would decay exponentially. Now, I worked for the Prophecy Club. I talked to General Parson. He came in as one of the people we had as a speaker. And he explained the taking out of Flight 800 with the continuous rod warhead. And also, I had read his papers on the destruction of the Marine building and got to talk to him about a lot of those things. So I've been involved in a lot of things. And my involvement in the NASA projects, I've also done military projects on miniature submarines for the Navy SEALs, UAVs for the military. So, I'm going all over the place with this, but I'm just trying to give you a history of who I am, what I've been involved in, and why they tried to kill me.
Let me jump in real quick if I can, please, and thank you for sharing so much information with us. When you got involved with these projects, how does somebody like yourself get involved with these type of projects? I mean, what kind of schooling did you have to go through? For our skeptics out there, is there any way to vet some of this you're talking about, like these organizations that you worked with and such?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the Prophecy Club, Stan Johnson.
I am not, but I'll look into that right now.
Okay. Well, Stan Johnson was, he got into biblical prophecy, and he designated us people. I was the Boston chapter of the Prophecy Club, and we brought military generals, we brought colonels, we brought a lot of different people who understood the conspiracy behind what was going on in the country into different major cities around the United States in the Prophecy Club in order to expose these things. And you're talking Dmitry Duneman, the Russian biblical preacher from Russia. You're talking Ted Gunderson. You're talking General Wheeler, General Parton, and these people knew about the Murray building. They knew about the conspiracy, and they were out. This is our military trying to warn us and tell us about these things. And then the Crusade Radio people, which was also Ted Gunderson's group of Unite for Justice, which they brought me into after because of my involvement with Craig Roberts. Craig Roberts, if you look him up, look up the Medusa file. Incredible research on the train wreck in Arizona that they were trying to pin on the Patriot movement, who was behind it, how they did it. Flight KAL-007, the fact that it did not crash into the ocean, but was landed on the Russian peninsula, and the congressman who was taken off of there was the person who McDonald personally threatened Rockefeller that he would stop his New World Order. So he paid the Russians $1 billion to capture the aircraft and take him off and put him in a gulag. And about 6 months later, they received a $1 billion loan from the American government, supposedly to help its economy. And it would take more than $1 billion to help the Russian economy. So Craig Roberts was an investigative writer, and he was also he had studied the shooting at Daley Plaza, and he was a master police officer for the Tulsa Police Department. And I was involved with them in getting this information to the FBI on what the true thing was. And he and I both sat down afterwards, and he said to me, he said, they ignored all this information we gave him because he was the liaison with the FBI. And the reason we got together is because my father was a helicopter pilot, and he was born in Tulsa. And Craig came on the internet and says, "Can anybody help me?" And being at MIT, I said, "Okay, yeah, I'll give you a hand." And we started working together and stuff like that. So that's how I got involved, and that's why I almost lost my life, because the Clintons, of course, I don't know if you know this, Billy Clinton is a former, well, not former, he is illegitimate offspring of Winthrop Rockefeller. And he owned Rose Law Firm that Hillary Clinton worked for. So the bottom line is that was never mentioned in the media. And so they had a vendetta against me because I was exposing the Murray building bombing, I was exposed to the Clintons and their connections to communists and liberals in the United States who were destroying our economy and doing the whole 9 yards. But most of my research and my schooling has been, I took courses at MIT, Northeastern University. I don't have a degree, but I have a certain amount of training in certain areas to be able to do this work and accomplish, the work tasks that I decided to do. I also went to UMass Law in
All right, wanted to take a quick break and give a shout out to myozarkhomestead.com. It is a rural community out in the Ozarks. It's an opportunity for people that want to get off the grid or have a security blanket, essentially, some survival type insurance if an SHTF scenario happens, or if you just want to get out of the corporate lifestyle. I've met Jeff personally. He's a really nice guy. I've had an opportunity to scout the area where it's located in the Ozarks. I spent a few days out there. Really nice people. I've met some of the members out there that have gotten involved. They're actually building some of the shelters and oversee some of the construction. They are in the process of putting together a bunker system that parallels many of the high-end military-grade bunkers. I mean, it's going to be very well built if they stick to the parameters of the blueprints, and they're doing it at a fraction of the cost of anywhere else that I've seen. So check it out, myozarkhomestead.com, if you're looking for a security blanket or just want to get off the grid. So they have multiple options for food supplies, organic type stuff, non-growth hormone, chickens that are running around, real true free-range chickens that are happy, not stuck in some cage their entire lives filled with steroids and growth hormones that can barely walk a couple of feet before they collapse within their own, within themselves because their bones won't take how big they are. And have you guys had a piece of chicken recently from the store? I mean, the chicken breasts nowadays are just huge. And they don't even taste like chicken anymore, in my opinion. You have to get it you have to make it very thin and cook it and deep fried almost to get any flavor out of it anymore, unless you're doing organic type chicken where they're real chickens. I mean, I had a friend that saw a chicken out that basically a chicken truck, a bunch of chickens, and he saw one of them trying to get out of the cage. It looked like it was trying to commit suicide. When the truck would go past another car the opposite direction, he said the thing was sticking its head out trying to get hit by the other vehicle. Just very weird. He said it had no feathers. It was almost like a Franken chicken. So, I mean, if this is something you guys want to do, or if you've seen the tiny homestead movement, you want to get into a smaller house, kind of downsize, not feel as restraint, not feel as many restraints to the 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 lifestyle that so many people have, 12-hour days, 5, 6, 7 days a week. This is an option for you. It's very affordable. The price points are incredible. And if you're looking for something that will also give you access to a bunker system, high quality, nobody can guarantee everything, you guys. I mean, certainly I can't. Hey, there could be a comet the size of Australia that hits New York City. You never know. But if you're looking for options, if you've got the money, if you want to put it into something that would give you just an extra level of security and opportunity, definitely check out My Ozark Homestead. Also, make sure to become an exclusive member at leakproject.com if you want access to a bunch of content that's only available at leakproject.com. And also youtube.com/clandestine time lord. Almost 400 full-featured podcasts, absolutely free. That's the shameless plug. Be the change you want to see.
Massachusetts. So basically, I had a combination of specialized training in PC board design and CAD/CAM and specific engineering courses at MIT, Northeastern, and UMass Lowell. That kind of let's just say it gave me a foot up on doing the work I was hired to do as a consultant for all those companies and different military projects. So I worked on military spy planes, the ones they used in Afghanistan. They converted, Beechcraft 300s and 350s to fly reconnaissance. And these planes were stacked with equipment that was much more valuable than some of the bigger planes that they had. So let's just say I was put in the position, I don't know if you're a God-fearing man or what your religious status are, but I can tell you this. For these positions, I was chosen for specifically, for a reason.
Did they give you any timelines, or were you able to gather any information on when things could really start to go south? Because I just saw a bill that passed in the White House, the strategic, no, not the Strategic Relocation Act. They changed that name from Peacetime Martial Law Bill back in 2011 really quick. But anyway, no, there was a new one that just came out about space weather situations or possibilities where they're fortifying the satellites, and then they're even making a lot of stuff here more secure at home, like nuclear reactors, which I think is a brilliant idea. I think they should get rid of all the nuclear reactors if that's even possible, in my opinion, just ticking time bombs. But anyway, that's a whole other episode. So what kind of insider info do you have on timelines, places to be, etc.? Now, I know John Moore came out back in the day with a declassified Navy map that they put some algorithms together and, think tanks. Okay, this is where to be. This is where not to be. This place could be underwater. This place could be underneath, close to a fault line, etc. And it kind of paralleled with Mr. What was his name? Casey, the person that was really good back, Edgar Casey. Yeah, Edgar Casey. So
right. Well, you've heard of remote viewing.
Oh yeah. I've interviewed people like Courtney Brown.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, the bottom line is, I think one thing about remote viewing is that it's a sort of transcendental meditation with out-of-body experience. But what you've got to understand is, with all that stuff, and I've studied the origins of religions, different religions across the world, even Islam. And I found that it all goes back to Baal religion. And Baal is actually what they call the Israeli version of Baal is he's a possessor of land. But Baal, according to the Mesopotamia area, Babylonian religion, is people who are possessed. So their religion called for getting themselves hyped up on drugs, pharmakia, and allowing the spirits to enter them. And that's how they use remote viewing. Well, remote viewers don't understand that once you get out of your body, you're a free spirit, and you can be attacked. You can be your soul or body.
Let's try this again. So
yes, okay. Well, remote viewing is actually demonic spirits that come in and show you things. Okay. A lot of people don't understand this. When you're in transcendental meditation, you're open to attack by these spirits. This is a spiritual warfare that we're going into, and this is what it's all about. And the bottom line is, these maps that are being shown are only partial, because if you go to Revelations and read Revelations tells it all. When it comes in and starts affecting the earth, what's going to happen is which is doing now, we're seeing that 7.0 earthquakes are now the new norm. And we're beginning to see 9s, and we'll see 10s and 12s and 14s and so on and so forth. But what they've discovered is that when it comes in, it's going to shift the plates of the earth. The earth was one solid mass back in Noah's time until it got hit by an asteroid that was brought in by Nibiru. And the earth had a canopy of water around it, and that's where the deluge came down from the heavens and erupted all the water that was underneath the solid crust of the earth until it got hit and by that asteroid, and it broke up the crust of the earth, compressing the water that was under the earth, shooting it up into the water that surrounded the earth and causing it to rain down. But basically, what it boils down to is this: there is no real timeline, and here's why. As this object, Nibiru, comes into our solar system, the planetary bodies is going to have an effect on it. As it comes in, it's going to slow down or speed up, depending upon what planetary body of our system is going to pull it in faster or slow it down. This is why Jesus turned around and said, "You shall not know the time of my coming, but if you watch, you shall know the season." Well, if you look at the weather patterns and things that are going on, you can see we're in the season. But the exact time of arrival is still unknown. Now, as this comes in, it will accelerate, and depending upon what large body is near it, it will have an effect on its gravitational pull, and it'll either speed it up or slow it down. So a timeline will be hard to predict unless you have a computer model of the planets, what the positions are going to be in, and the exact position of Nibiru is going to be in when it approaches this planet. Okay, so they can't really give you a timeline, and I can't really give you a timeline because of the effect of the solar bodies in our solar system, and also as it comes in and approaches us, it's dragging behind it not only debris, but on top of it, it's dragging its own planets. So those are going to have effects, cause and effects to the planets of our planet. So this is going to slow it down and speed it up. It's almost like a breathing entity. It just goes in, it goes out, it goes in, it goes out, speeds up, slows down. Bottom line is they can't pinpoint the date, but they know it's going to be pretty soon. That's all I can say to that. Now NASA is being tight-lipped still about this, but some people are coming out of the woodwork, including myself, and telling people about these things and about what's happening. My involvement has been in a lot of this stuff has been who the world leaders are, what they're planning, what they're doing, how they're keeping it secret for their depopulation agenda. Because anybody living on coastal cities, and even you in Maine, and the reason I say this is because I own property in Maine, and I was just up there last fall building a cabin on my land until I figured, I got to get out of there because basically the whole eastern seaboard is going to be underwater, and my property is going to be underwater. So I'm wondering why I'm still paying taxes on the property. But the bottom line to this is that
have you considered purchasing a large boat out there? Just kidding.
I live. Are you guys from Maine, or some of you guys are from Maine, right?
No, I was actually going to say we're currently in San Antonio, Texas, and with all the money that I've seen being pumped out here, there's a giant new NSA building out here. They're putting a ton of government buildings in this area. I'm wondering if they're considering this to be a safe spot or a safer location that might weather the storm when or if this does happen.
It will be, but you got to be careful because I was working down in San Antonio a couple of months ago. I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area now. But basically, I was working in San Antonio doing modifications to jet aircraft, replacing business jets with new engine upgrades. But basically, closer to the coastal areas are going to be underwater. A large portion of Arizona is going to be underwater. Southern California underwater. When this thing gets really in close, I mean, it's going to start moving the plates of the Earth around. And I was getting to that when I was talking about the asteroid coming down and hitting. So when this thing comes in, you're going to see mountains rising out of the sea, mountains dropping into the sea, Everest gone, other places gone. The whole map of the world is going to be different. And if it flips off its axis, we're going to be seeing 500-mile-an-hour winds. We're going to see the Earth spinning like the top. I mean, you'll see the clouds race by like they're in a road race. This is how bad it's going to be. And this is all going to transpire over close to 20 and a half hours to 45 minutes worth of time, which means that the water on the Earth is going to be like a full bowl of water and you trying to spin around real quick. The water is going to go everywhere. And because the bulge of water on the equator is going to wash out all the coastal cities. So the further you are away from San Antonio and to the more centralized center part of the states, away from the fault line that runs up to the Great Lakes, better off you are. But no place is safe because these plates that we're living on are going to be slipping and sliding. If the Earth flips, these plates are going to be slipping like they're on a greased floor. It's going to be just total mayhem. That's all I can say.
Sure.
And I refuse to take jobs. I've been getting emails and mails to take jobs along in like Savannah, Georgia. Work for Gulfstream out there, and I refuse. That's why I moved away from Maine, and that's why the whole East Coast up to the Appalachian Mountains is going to be pretty much underwater. Okay, if you aren't high and dry, then you're fried. That's all there is to it. But to get back to the work I did at NASA, I don't know why it worked out this way. Well, I do know why, but if I told you, I don't think you'd believe me. If the instruments I worked on, the satellites and the instruments I worked on for NASA, specifically prove that the Revelations part of the Bible is 100% correct, and the science proves the religion because it shows that Nibiru is coming in to our solar system. And I was given the chance to work on those projects, I think because of my faith and because I was beginning to match the science to the prophecy. And most of my work has been doing that, has been proven the Bible is 100% accurate. It's like somebody was sitting in the future watching these things transpire and wrote them down and wrote them from a cosmological situation. Whoever wrote those pieces of the Bible could see the future. There's no two ways in my mind about it, especially after the science I worked on pretty much said, yeah, well, this is what's going to happen. And they are literal translations. And the science that I worked on is proven them were literal. It's incredible. I used to be an atheist.
Now, could you talk?
What does that tell you?
I mean, something changed your mind. Obviously, you saw something or enough impact to you to change your mind. I know people that are atheists, and they're gung-ho about it. I know people that, from a wide different a range, I should say, essentially, of spiritual beliefs. I know people that have no spiritual beliefs, but most people do have some type of spiritual belief. And I'll bet you feel a lot better now, feeling that when you do finally leave this earth, this physical body, you'll have somewhere else to go to, and you're not just going to be nothing.
Oh, yeah. There's nothing that can shake my faith. And I'll tell you, I was even into the occult. Like I said, I studied the origins of religion because I wanted to be able to be that guy who could see in the future. And all of the religions turned up apostate except for the Bible, because the Bible has a 100% accuracy rate. You can't beat that. And then I'll tell you a little story, something that happened to me. I was going to school to learn PC board design and layout and CAD/CAM. And I came home from school, and I just sat down on the couch, and for no reason at all, I just kind of like fell back, and it's like I went into this vision. And it was like I was out of my body, having an out-of-body experience. And I had studied Zen Buddhism and Hare Krishnaism, so I knew out-of-body travel was possible. But in this instance, I went through almost like a dark tunnel, like they tell you, there's a dark tunnel. And I came into this room filled with light, and there in front of me were these people sitting on the floor. And one person was sitting on this bench in front of Jesus. And Jesus looked at me, and all he said to me was, there's somebody I want you to he said, Jim, there's somebody I want you to get rid of from me. And I know in the Christian faith, you have to test the spirits because you don't know who you're talking to. Could be evil spirits, could be whatever. So I said, well, the Bible tells me thou shalt not kill. And all of a sudden, he started fading away from me. I started leaving. And I thought I had offended him. So I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. And I stopped moving away from him, and he just smiled. Well, I came back into my body, and this whole thing took all 2 minutes. I felt a feeling of elation that I'd never felt before in my life. And I did drugs, as a kid. But I came out of this, and I felt like I'd been laughing for 2 or 3 hours, and I such an uplifting feeling. It was like the Holy Spirit had given me overwhelming joy. So I knew whatever transpired there in those minutes was real, and that I wasn't talking to an evil spirit, but I was actually talking to the creator of the universe, Jesus. And it dawned on me that the person he wanted me to get rid of was my old self, so that he could use me to do the things for him. Because the schooling I went to was directly responsible for me getting involved with NASA. I was taking CAD/CAM design and electrical engineering. I can do Boolean algebra down to the circuit level and figure out logic circuits. Bang! I don't know if you know about all this stuff, but the bottom line is that prepared me for my work at NASA. And in working for NASA, it turned around making it probable for me to use the science to prove the Bible correct. So there was a method to the madness of what I had experienced and what I went through. And I didn't know all this. And a few weeks later, I just turned to a friend of mine who was a lawyer in Massachusetts. I said to him, oh, I'm going to go work for NASA. I'm going to do work for NASA. And I don't know why he even said that. But like about a month later, I was working for Lockheed in New Hampshire, working on a satellite, SOHO, LASCO to study the sun. And then because of that work, MIT says, oh, we saw you did work on this satellite. You want to come work for us on these? So I went and worked for them on XT. So it wasn't by accident. It wasn't by happenstance. It wasn't by, oh, well, you just got lucky. No, you're either blessed or you're not. But God will use you if you're a blank slate. I mean, and I was a blank slate because I didn't believe that heavily in who he was. And I still remained steadfast, and I studied all the other religions hoping to find the truth. And I was brought to the truth. I was brought to the master. And I was raised up and chosen for a certain series of things. There's a passage in the Bible that says, many are called, but few are chosen. So I was chosen to work on things. And, to tell you the truth, to this day, I can't tell you how I did what I did. At the time, I said, oh, I got to do this and that and that and this, and bang, and here's what the design's going to look at. And that's what flew on these spacecraft. As a matter of fact, the AXAF lens, focal lens, that they could design it and they could understand how it would operate, but they couldn't visualize it. They couldn't see it. They didn't know how to put it on paper so that the machinists could machine it to make it work. And then they brought the project. I was working on a different project at MIT, and they came over to me, and the guy who was the director of that project said to me, he says, well, we heard you have an incredible talent, and we want you to design this for us. So while I was working on another project, they gave me that project too, and I worked on it. And that project, and that guy who headed that project, after we did that work on the focal array, he brought a letter over to me, and he says, here, you have to see this. And he gave it to me, and it was from the head of NASA, Golden, thanking us for the design we had completed. That I didn't get that on any other project. Okay, and he got that over especially for me, because without my involvement, I don't think they could have designed it. They couldn't see what the focal array would look like, but they could go through the numbers and say, well, this is what it's got to do. It's got to have a focal length of this much. It's got to be almost like a bowl with steps in it. So it's an incredibly complex piece of design that they had to do, and they couldn't visualize it. So they brought it to me. And why me? I don't know. I can't tell you. To this day, I can't tell you how I interpreted their numbers into this device, but it worked. And not because of anything I did. I think it's because of who was behind me and who was using me. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It was as if, in your eyes, you feel like divine intervention was working through you and just kind of flowing. That's fascinating. Now, did you say that you also worked on the solar simulators and are there really artificial suns in the sky that people go, oh, that's the sun? No, it's not. That's a Fresnel lens. I was being sarcastic at the end.
I never worked on. Yeah, no. I think I get drift. You mean the solar lenses that they've placed in outer space?
Well, I've seen patents. Does that mean they've ever gone into full play? No, not at all. But I have seen patents and blueprints and pictures on the internet, and obviously you can do just about anything on the internet. But are there really artificial suns out there? Are there giant lenses out there that look like suns, or they're harnessing the sun's energy and reflecting it back on our planet? Or is any of that legit?
Yes. They can light up a whole city if they wanted to. But I think they're holding this information back. Well, you do understand that back in the 60s, they already had a flight simulator for UFOs. You understand that, right?
Doesn't surprise me a bit.
These craft are powered by what they call zero-point energy, which came from Nikola Tesla. And they've taken all his information out of the libraries and they've classified it, because he was the one responsible for the Tunguska blast. All the trees that got blown down in a 100-mile radius. That's because Nikola Tesla had the first plasma weapon. He focused his energy and meant to bounce it off the ionosphere and hit the North Pole where there was nothing to be destroyed. But he miscalculated and defected, and the plasma burst hit the ionosphere and came down in Tunguska, Russia. They thought at first Tunguska blast was caused from an asteroid coming over and blowing up, but no one saw the asteroid come across and then explode. And nobody found parts of an asteroid in Tunguska. Nobody found iron core at the center of the blast, which should have been there, okay, or any of the surrounding area. It was because of Nikola Tesla's plasma, and they've got these weapons already, okay? They've got them space-based. They've got more than they think, and they already have colonizations on Mars. I've seen the working model of a UFO, of their design. And the Nazi Germany had theirs back during World War II. You don't think we knew about these? Of course we did. And why is it in all these years of designing rockets that we haven't had any new advances in space engines or things of this nature? You take a look at Robert Searle, his work on using what he calls 0-point energy, but what he does is his machines are magnetized and they spin in a certain way that they create an ion drive system. And he's been pushing that for years, and nobody can discount his science. And I even talked to one of the people who worked for him. He was on our program, and I got to talk to him and talk technical terms with how the drive system works and how he guides the system. I couldn't understand how they guide it and how it changes direction, but that it does use another form of, or a different type of engine than a rocket engine, an ion field that kind of like tears up the fabric of space. So the whole thing here is that, they've got these things, and you won't believe this, but by using mercury in these drive systems and spinning it real quick and driving it through the system, they can actually create a gravitational wave, which the ship rides on, which can exceed the speed of light. It was Caltech. A couple of students came out and said, "Oh, well, we found where we can go at least 5 times or 15 times the speed of light, but just by using frequency." Well, everything in our physical world is nothing but frequency. No matter how solid it is, it's vibrating and has what we call resonance frequency. When I design spacecraft to go up into space, I have to make sure that the resonance frequency of the things I design are low frequency, so they don't tear themselves apart by the time it gets to orbit because of the vibration from these rockets. The longer an object is, the more it vibrates. The shorter it is, the less it vibrates. If you've got to put a big object in space, you have to make sure that that's structured in such a way that it doesn't shake itself apart by the time it gets up there. So natural frequency is the biggest factor. They found that somewhere near 5,000 hertz, they can exceed the speed of light by at least 15 times. So, so what does the government know that I don't know? Not much. Not much. If you separate the physical world from the spiritual world, not much, because it's all frequency. Matter is nothing but frequency. It's like a light particle is a particle and it's a wave at the same time. It's like the things that make up protons, neutrons, and electrons are quarks, and quarks don't exist in our timeline. So the bottom line is, how is it possible for something that doesn't exist in our time continuum to make up objects that do? Because it's an illusion. It's frequency. It's vibratory. Everything is, even our human bodies. Did you know that the vibratory frequency of the Earth is the same as humans? Imagine that.
That's incredible.
It is.
Let me jump in real quick if I can, and I'm sorry to interrupt because you're on a roll here, but I'd love to ask you a couple of questions about some of the satellites that you worked on. I'm thinking of, obviously, the tracking capabilities, the imagery. I was told when I was like 12, so that would have been, 27 years ago, that they could take pictures of people's shoelaces from space. I mean, I knew people that literally worked on the inside. They couldn't give me too much information, but they said they can take pictures of your shoelaces from space. And, you know, if they could do it then, they could probably do it even 20 years before that. I don't know. So I'm just thinking to myself, how far advanced are these satellites? Can they pick up what you're saying? Can they pick up your infrared spectrum? Are there individual signatures that everybody has based upon their vibrational frequency or their temperature? I mean, is there certain ways to track people without seeing their face and stuff like that? How far in the future are these satellites?
Let's put it this way. I was asked to work on a project, I was being considered for working on a project that we would develop and design an instrument that could pick up bio-life forms from anywhere. And we're not just talking about heat signatures. We're talking about a soldier walking out into a forest and scanning this thing and saying, oh yeah, there's 3 or 4 people over there, there's 4 over there, there's 1 over there. And then they can direct their fire directly to those positions.
What about smart dust?
Smart dust? I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, smart dust is they're very small tracking chips, and they used to be about the size of, you know, you could fit a few of them underneath a penny, but now they're so small they're like a nano level. I didn't know if you knew about any spraying where they could get lodged into certain populations or people or individuals and track via that way as well. Or, I mean, there's got to be multiple applications for the chemtrails.
Yeah, that I've heard of that. Okay, nanotechnology, small particles that supposedly are sprayed, and when they're inhaled in the human body, they can assemble themselves and either do transponder type of deals or setups. That isn't beyond the path or beyond the point of reality, and I'll tell you why. I was at I was at Goddard Space Flight Center, and I'm talking to the head of the engineering department I'm working for. And I said, you know something? I said, you know, if we had a way that we could track quarks as they pop in and out of this reality, we could set up and tag a quark with either a positive or negative, and then when it reappears someplace else, we'd have instantaneous communication. And he goes, oh, you know, he says, wow, that's a thought. And a month later, I hear a news release saying that they have developed what they called a transporter, like in Star Trek, a transporter. And they did exactly that, using quarks to do so. Okay, but I don't know if they masked what they were saying by calling it a transporter, or if what they were really saying is they transported a way of communicating, because once a quark disappears, wherever it disappears from, it pops into another portion of reality instantly. There's no time loss. So that's why it would make instantaneous communications. No matter how far in the universe you were away from the mother planet, you could call them up and it'd be like me talking to you right now on the phone. Okay? But they figured out a way to do it. But I popped that question when I was at Goddard Space Flight Center to the head of the engineering. And I don't know if I was ahead of my time or whether basically what had transpired was that they used that information to do exactly that. So there is a way they can tag quarks to do that. Now, if they could tag quarks in such a way to be able to understand where they are at a certain point in the universe, be able to track them, then yes, that's a possibility, but on a different theory than what you're thinking they do, whether it be a nanoparticle or whatever. But if you're talking about quarks, you're talking about real nanotechnology. And if they could tag that, they can trace anybody, because those quarks pop up everywhere, including in the human body. So they have the ability to track everybody everywhere anytime they want, if they know how to control that technology.
Did you ever work on any Star Wars? I'm back in the 80s. They talked about that Star Wars tech, and then they went real hush-hush. So where did that go?
Well, they've completed it. They've completed the test. They've got a Star Wars shield. They have it. It is. They during Ronald Reagan's time, they had it. They've even shown pictures of them taking down missiles using these devices. Okay. They've had designs for plasma-based weapons based on Boeing 747. that could act as a defense shield around the area. And these things are direct line of sight weapon. You don't have to calculate, oh, this rocket has to reach this apogee at this point in time and has to be fired in this time in order to stop this weapon at a certain point in time. The Raytheon systems that they used over in Israel to stop the Scuds coming in during the first Iraqi war, that's old technology. That's and they're not releasing the information on the new technology, because if they get in a war, which we averted by not hiring Hillary into office, if we get in a war with Russia, and Russia knows this, Russia's already stated that they know if they get into a war with America, they're not going to be facing an army that is smaller than it, which is what we are because of what Obama's done, but they're going to be facing weaponry that is unimaginable. And the Russians were the first to come across these plasma weapons back in the 90s. They had them. They would detonate a nuclear device underneath the ground, absorb the energy, and then focus the plasma and knock out satellites. And they were doing it back then. You know, so we've gone beyond that, and we have our own UFOs, but they're not UFOs. They're space vehicles with different anti-gravitational motors and engines that use zero-based energy to travel the stars. They do this.
Is there anything you could tell us about the Nephilim or the Anunnaki? Are they one and the same? And do you have insider info on them as well?
Well, that's all in the book of Enoch. Okay, the Nephilim. Well, first start. The fallen angels are the Watchers. The Watchers came down, took women as their wives, Earth women, spawned the Nephilim. The Nephilim were the giants. They just recently in Afghanistan captured one, wiped out an entire military squad. The first squad, the second squad was sent in, and they took it down and captured it. And they could tell it was the Nephilim because it had 6 toes and six fingers. They are the offspring of fallen angels, or the angels that were disembodied and placed into the atmosphere around the earth. That's what these UFOs are. They're not aliens. They are demons, and they can manipulate the physical and the spiritual world. And they've been around since the nuclear age and before then, and they tell everybody, oh yeah, we're here to help. Baloney. They're the demonic spirits that God took the fallen angels out of the bodies of humans, which they adapted and took form, and put them into the atmosphere. And that is who they are. The Nephilim are the Watchers, not the Nephilim. The Nephilim are the offspring, the giants, from the Watchers, and they've been digging up giant skeletons all over the earth, including in America. And they're the ones who created and built the pyramids and built all the giant structures that today we still don't have the engineering technology to do it. And they've been coming down here and mining gold to stabilize their atmosphere for the longest time. And they live on the 7th planet of Nibiru. And they are the fallen angels. They are the angels of God who turned against them. So, yeah, there's a report, and if you can find it, go on YouTube. A guy went down to South Africa, and he found these circular rock structures all over Africa, over 150 of them. And they found that when they walked into these zones with their cell phones quit working. Not only did they quit working, but sometimes they would work, and when they made the call, their cell phones would originate from a cell phone tower over 150 miles away from them. And they figured out that these structures are some sort of transporting device, and they believe, they know for sure that they were all over gold mines that was being gold and brought up to the Anunnaki, and the Anunnaki were using them in some sort of technology to stabilize their atmosphere. But the bottom line to this is, at those sites, they discovered that these cones, and they took 2 of these cones and they would bang them together, and they'd emit this perfect frequency. And they believed that these devices were used to levitate gold, a certain weight of gold or gold, and be able to move it without, loading it onto something with wheels or whatever, and they were able to use these to move this stuff around. I don't know if you've ever heard of the guy down in Florida who had the Coral Castle.
Oh yeah.
And well, one guy went in one time, and after he left, dropping something off, he went back because he'd forgotten something. And he saw this guy with an electrical device, and these huge things of coral were being levitated. It's being done by frequency. If you can reach the harmonic frequency to nullify the frequency's mass, then all you need is very little effort to push it, or to lift it, or to move it. And they can do that. And this is all part of the secret weapons and systems that America's been working on. And this all evolves from things that Nikola Tesla was involved in. This is old school. Remember the old saying, "Curious George"? Remember that? If you get into a lot of different things, somebody used to call you Curious George. It may have been before your time, but somebody called you Curious George. You know where that saying emanated from? George W. Herbert Walker Bush was Curious George. He was brought over from Germany, where his family were Germans, and he was a spy for the Germans and a Nazi. And Herbert Walker Bush was in the German Navy before he came over to the United States in around 1933, or right before 1933. His family's name is really Scherf. They're Nazis. Why do you think after 9/11 they started putting in the Patriot Act and all those? Do you think they just wrote the Patriot Act during that time? No, that was an extensive document that was written pre 9/11. And the Bushes, including Prescott Bush, was working in Congress in World War II and still trading with the Germans while while he was in the Senate. So they passed the Trading with the Enemy Act to stop him from doing that. But the Ford Motor Company had built a truck factory over in Germany, which was never bombed until close to the end of the war. And after it was bombed, Ford Company, who had been trading with the enemy on German soil, building trucks for the German army, sued the American government and won in court for damages to his factory in Germany. IG Farben, the German chemical company, now today known as Bayer Aspirin, was headed by Prescott Bush, the grandfather of Herbert Walker, or the father of Herbert Walker Bush, grandfather of George W., okay, along with the Rothschilds and Rockefellers were chairmen of IG Farben. Now, IG Farben was a company that produced Zyklon B, the gas used to kill the Jews. Now, why would the Jews be making gas that would kill their own people? Ask yourself that question. And why was the chemical plant of IG Farben never bombed during World War II, when it was also producing the fuel for the German V-2 rockets? Why? Very simple answer to this. It's because the people who funded the fascists were the American bankers and the British bankers. It didn't matter who won the war. Both sides would still owe the same banking family the money. War was good business. The Queen of England, her lineage is from Germany. You got to remember, World War I was no more than a war of first cousins. They were all intermarried: Russians, American, British, French, Germans, Spanish. They've been intermarrying for years. The kings of Spain, they were all first cousins. The control for money, not for life on earth any better. And today it's the same way. So you go back and look at Ford Motor Company, you look at the Bushes, you look at Curious George. He used to go into Nikola Tesla's laboratory, and Nikola Tesla coined the name Curious George. And he was talking about Herbert Walker Bush because he was getting into everything. So, yeah, it's all connected. And why would the Jews be, let's say, making Zyklon B for the Germans to kill their own people? Very simple. Those are the Ashkenazi Jews. Now, if you're familiar with the Ashkenazi Jews, you'll know that they're from the steppes of Russia, where Russia is, where Mikhail Gorbachev came from. It's like the elitists of the Russian Empire. Well, the Ashkenazi Jews were from that area. And when they were caught between a war between the Muslims and the Christians, they converted to Judaism. They're what Jesus refers to as synagogue of Satan, who are not Jews. And they're the ones who presently are the Zionists in Israel. So, do the Palestinians have a case for them taking their land? Well, you got to remember that not all the Roman soldiers took all of the Jews after they destroyed the temple. Some of them hid in the hills. They came back and settled in what is known as Palestine. So who are the real Jews? I'm not saying there are no real Jews in Israel. I'm just saying that the controlling faction are Zionists. They are the synagogue of Satan that Christ is talking about. All this stuff is connected. People don't understand this because the world elite has been keeping this information from us. All the technology that they've gained, the zero-point energy, the UFO crafts, the technology you're talking about of being able to destroy whole cities from outer space, that's real stuff. I was working on spy satellites back when I was at Lockheed. I was doing some work on them. But, I can't go into depth about what I did. I can tell you what I did. I just can't tell you what's involved in that stuff. I never would. And I know Snowden performed a service to the United States, but my whole family has been former military. Both my mother and father worked at the Pentagon. My brother was a captain in the Army. His wife a captain, and she had a top secret clearance. My sister had top secret in the Navy. They wanted me to go to West Point. It's like, sure, I'd go to West Point if the American government was working for the American people, but they weren't, and I knew it back then. So I was even offered a job at Harvard, but I turned it down. So, a lot of this stuff that's going on in this world today is all interconnected, and it's all predicted years in advance in the Bible. And there's not a single thing that goes on in today's world that isn't written in the Bible, including the United States and her part in this whole end times thing.
You've had an incredible life path and seen some amazing things, done some amazing things, very prestigious positions of your career path, etc. And I would be really interested to know also if the Anunnaki and the Watchers the same? Like, is Enlil, Enki, those lines that are referred to and talked about in different scriptures, is that legit?
Yes, absolutely. And what a lot of people, our military is deathly scared of what's coming. They can't fight these creatures because their technology is beyond us. And the elite of the world have already made contact with these things years ago. And basically, they're going to be part of their army. So the military, who are strict constitutionalists and strict compatriots of the United States, are definitely afraid. They'll fight. Even if they lose, they'll fight. They don't care. Because they know they're fighting the Anunnaki. They know they're going to be fighting evil, an evil upon evil. Just take a look at what these elite have done. They didn't run planes into the 9/11. There were no planes. They just set off charges and then in the videos added the planes afterwards. That's what they did. And they found traces of ions in the water underneath the World Trade Center, which means some sort of a fissionable device had to be used. And some people are saying a scalar weapon that they had space-based hit that building at certain points in time. But the bottom line is it was a controlled demolition, both Twin Towers and Building 7. But they did find ions in the water underneath the building, which means they also used some sort of a charge of a nuclear device of sorts. And I'm still wondering if it was a scalar device, because bottom line was there were cars like blocks away that were burnt to crisp, and there's no explanation for how that happened. None whatsoever. So, yeah, they got these weapons. Yeah, the Anunnaki are coming back. That's why the fact that Nibiru is in our solar system would make the journey to Earth a lot simpler for them if they are based on the seventh planet like they think they are, in which they pretty much know they are, because our military is shit scared. if you can imagine our military being shit scared of these things. But the religious military members know it's a battle that the Bible has told us we're going to have to fight. Now, I don't know what Trump's plan in this whole thing was. I do believe if you watch what a person does rather than what a person says, you will know his true heart. And if you take a look at the actions of Trump, he's not even sworn in as president, and he's saved this country millions of dollars. He's already bringing jobs back, manufacturing jobs. U.S. Steel is bringing 10,000 jobs back. So I think he's a man of his word. He may be bold and he may be saying things straight to your face, but he follows through. You know, it's not like a politician who tells you they're going to do this and that. I mean, he's a businessman. If he says he's going to do this and that, he has to do that because he's into a contract. So watch what the man is doing, not what he's saying. And people are watching what he's saying because they're used to listening to politicians. And then politicians do the exact opposite, but people forget. Okay? And, oh, well, he made that promise. Oh, yeah, I remember he made that promise. Well, he didn't follow through. Oh, you're right. Oh, well, excuse me. But Trump is a businessman. He signed your contracts. He's signing those contracts as president. So he's got to follow through on his end of the deal. And his whole life has been following through. So what part in history he plays, I believe he was also chosen. Ronald Reagan made this statement. Donald Trump visited the White House, and Ronald Reagan was standing in line, and he shook Donald Trump's hand. And Ronald Reagan made this statement afterwards. He says, I don't know why I felt this way. He says, but I felt I was shaking the hand of the President of the United States. Now, Ronald Reagan was a very religious person, and the Holy Spirit works in his elect, in his people. And people can see things because, and that's what the world order is afraid of, the Holy Spirit giving us the information of what they're about to do and giving us discernment to be telling what they're doing. And that's why they got to take the Christians out, because they can't get away with anything with us still in the world. And the bottom line is, God selects the leaders of the nation. The nation has turned against him. If the nation has aborted its children and made those sacrifices to Satan, which they do, and they just tell you, oh, this is just aborting, but these Satanists have been, like with Ted Gunderson, we discovered that they were committing child sacrifices and drinking the blood. I met a Satanist on our radio station who turned to a Christian, okay, and I had a conversation. When they kill these children, the children are so frightened that certain, I forget what they call them, endorphins is what they are released in the blood, and they drink this, and this supposedly keeps these elite, gives them a high, first of all, and keeps them young, secondly. So, and his whole family, his father was a Satanist, and he used to attend Bohemian Grove. And if you ever get the chance, read his book, Down the Rabbit Hole. Think of his name. I talk to him all the time, but I'll think of it. But the bottom line here is that what we're going through is all connected. All this space-based technology that I worked on is proving that the biblical end of things are correct and true. And the elite of this world are keeping all this information and technology from us. We could have no starvation in this world. We could have energy in our houses that could be created just by having a device that can collect it. Nikola Tesla built a coil-type device that could put in a car when he had his labs in New Jersey at the laboratory, and he drove from New Jersey to Niagara Falls and back. When he got back, he took the device out. He didn't want the American government getting a hold of it. But he knew that they would cover that information up, and that's what they've done. They've hidden this technology from us. This Earth could be a utopia, not run by the elites, but just people living free, and they don't want that. They're control freaks. So all this is leading up to the final battle, which they were trying to push through Hillary Clinton with Russia. And Russia even said, you get Hillary as president, it's war. You know, a lot of people don't know this. Did you know that during our American Civil War, that Russia parked its Navy in New York Harbor and San Francisco Harbor to protect the North from British ships coming in and bombing New York Harbor? Because we didn't have a big Navy at that time. All we had was the Constitution, you know, and a couple of smaller warships. We couldn't match the British. And they were trying to run our blockade. So while we had all our ships blockading British ships, to keep them from supplying the South, the Russians parked their ships in the Northern Harbor. And the Rothschilds were the ones behind the assassination of Lincoln and Kennedy and the Tsar of Russia. And they're the ones who funded the overthrow of the Tsar because of the Tsar protecting the American North during the Civil War, because they wanted the South as their breadbasket, and they wanted their foothold in America. And they didn't get it until 1913 when they created the Federal Reserve Board and totally violated the Constitution on how they got their money to run this government. And that was when the takeover started. And in 1933, they sealed the deal. So it's all connected. And people don't understand that. And I don't know if I digress from your original question, but you can see I've kind of connected all the dots.
Yeah, this is great. I'm so glad that you reached out to us. I mean, you've spent about an hour and a half with us, and I've said very little. So, I mean, just the amount of information you've brought to the table is incredible. I really appreciate it. This is wonderful. I'm sure our audience will appreciate this information as well, because the fact that you know about the tech, as you say, and what you've worked on, and you're verifying that the Anunnaki is legit, you're verifying Nibiru is real, a lot of this stuff that there's so much speculation on the internet. It's neat to talk to somebody that's actually worked on the equipment and been there. And let me ask you this also, what was the security like when you worked on these types of satellites and this, I guess you could say fringe type technology far out there?
Well, there's a difference in technology. Okay. At MIT, the security was not very high, because everything we worked on was public knowledge, because of the fact that we actually didn't use up-to-date technology on spacecraft, because anything that they use on spacecraft has to be tested and proven, and that it won't fail. Okay, so they're like a generation to 2 generations behind where the technology is, except when it comes to high security stuff. Now, to be on the base at Goddard Space Flight Center, you have to go through very rigorous background checks, and you have to take 2 courses in what they call ITAR, International Trade Regulations. So I forget the exact meaning of that acronym. But what you do is you make sure that the stuff you work on, that you don't go to any of the third world countries that are banned by the U.S. market, because you're a high value target, and you can't release even our telecommunications information to these countries, because they'll copy it. The way Billy Clinton gave the guidance system from a Loral missile system over to the Chinese during his tenure, and the whole intelligence community was up in arms about it. They were pissed, and the excuse they used was, the head of Hughes Aircraft wants the Chinese to launch our satellites, so why don't you give the Chinese a good guidance system so they can get it in space? And Clinton just jumped on that boat. And then the Chinese, once they got that Loral missile system, transferred it to their ICBMs, and then started threatening to nuke Los Angeles. Well, it's all public knowledge, But the technology, like the companies I worked for, I ran the design department for General Dynamics down in Georgia, Gwinnett, Georgia. And we were working on satellite telecommunication systems for the military, for the Marines, for just the military. Military, they take these satellite dishes out into the desert, flip them up. GPS system would locate the satellite they had to hook to, and then they would communicate this information from the battlefield. All satellite systems. I was head of the department that would configure these satellites, the proper software, do the final checks on these systems, and then deliver them to the military. When you go through a company like that, it was more elaborate of a security system I had to go to than, say, I was at MIT, or when Harvard Smithsonian Institute offered me a job to design satellites for them, or it was a little bit more stringent or maybe just the same as when I went through the security background checks at Goddard Space Flight Center. And it made it difficult for me to buy weapons because going through those types of background checks, the companies who were going to sell me the weapons would say, oh, well, you're on some sort of a list. And then one guy confided to me once and said, yeah, the reason you were held up longer is because you worked in the let's say, security industries. And when you go through a large background check like that, they have to find out why you're going through a large background check like that. So it takes them longer to do a background check on it to purchase a weapon of sorts. But the bottom line is it's very strict. Okay. And even though I've held only a confidential level, which there's no real such thing, but it's like the lowest level. And I never applied. Well, I was at Goddard Space Flight Center. I was applying for my secret clearance. They recommended I do that, and so I said, okay, fine. So I started doing it, and I was going through with it. And then when you leave a company like Goddard Space Flight Center, being a consultant as I was, going to different companies, it was unnecessary for the next company I worked for. So it would end there. But if you're working for a secret contractor or a contractor who deals with ITAR-sensitive information or even secretive information, you have to get clearance. And if you leave that company, then there's no longer a reason for you to have clearance. Now, I've worked at a lot of airports doing modifications to jet aircraft, to business jet aircraft. And you need a background check to get to the tarmac, to be out on the tarmac, to be able to walk around. I mean, they don't want terrorists running around on the tarmac, of course. So you have to go through Homeland Security background check. And I've had my badges to get out on the tarmac. And I can get into areas of the airport that some people can't. So, it is tight for the scientific community. In answer to your question, not so tight because you're working on information that is public domain information. But when you're working places like I worked at the airport in Hagerstown. Hagerstown is where Air Force One flies into when the president goes to Camp David. And I had security clearance to go to the tarmac to be out there. And you go through extensive background checks. And I was working on surveillance planes for the military at that point, and at that airport. And we were designing surveillance planes for the military. So, which my nephew's friends, because he was a Kiowa helicopter pilot in the military, still is, some of his friends transferred from flying the Kiowas to flying the planes that I had developed for the Afghanistan war. My son was even an artillery person who called and direct live fire into a battle zone. And the information that was coming off those airplanes, they were using in real time. So, yeah, it's, and even though I only had a confidential clearance, I had access to things that I can't tell you about, and things I know that they can do with these things because I worked on them and I figured them out. So, yeah, and the reason they trust me is because they know I'm a patriot, and our military is on the people's side, not these globalist side. They hate them, and that's why Trump's putting them in all his cabinet positions. He wants a strong America, and he wants a dedicated America. And he doesn't want a globalist America. And they've been trying to kill our economy for years so that they could transfer the economic power to their globalist position. That's why the banks seized on 2008 financial downfall to restrict funds to American businesses. It's all part of their plan to destroy the economy of the United States, as well as the United States itself, by bringing in all these Muslims and starting a war in America between the classes of blacks and Islamic jihadists in America. That's their intent. That's the plan. That's why the UN soldiers have been coming into the United States and being placed on American military bases and given American military uniforms. And that's why Americans are seeing all these UN vehicles all over the place. But I think that's all in a preparation for Nibiru coming in. And our military, like I said, is afraid of Nibiru and the Anunnaki. And the fact that these giants are going to come back. and their technology. We've been able over a period of time to be able to bring some of these craft down, but it's the evil behind them that our military is worried about, and it's stretching their faith. So in answer to your question, yeah, the Anunnaki, the technology is there. Our American military is preparing for them, and the destruction, just the planet alone, its passing in this universe, or our solar system, I should say, is going to be devastating.
I really appreciate you reaching out to us. I know that you by any means didn't have to, so I just feel honored that you did. And if you would possibly be interested maybe in coming back on the show with us sometime, that'd be fantastic. Thanks for everything.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'd be happy to. There's more to come. There's more. I think I've been doing this for over 20 to 30 years. I've not only been looking at the conspiracy side of things, trying to figure out what is conspiracy and what is not. So, looking at the technology of the things I work on and understanding the technology of what's hidden from us. You've heard of Jim Garrow?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we had him on our show. Okay. And we've spoken to him many times personally. Have you had him on your show?
No, I haven't.
You know, okay, it's going to be tough getting him on now, and I'll tell you why. We were knocked off the air quite a few times. As you can see, we were knocked off the air quite a few times today. But during the time that I was with Crusade Radio, we had Jim Garrow on, and they framed him. His son was a police officer up in Canada, and somebody got to his son through corruption or whatever, and planted a pistol in his camper, and they discovered it. Of course, they discovered it. They knew where it was because they planted it. And the condition of his the outcome of his court case was that he couldn't give any more lecture tours, being that he was former CIA. So that came about shortly after he appeared on our show, and we were doing simultaneous broadcasts, simulcasts they call them, with Walls of Our Mind, Terry Dodd out in Colorado, and his host, Red Beckman. And Red Beckman was the person who helped co-write the book, The Law That Never Was, showing that the income tax, which goes into the Federal Reserve, the private central bank of the Rothschilds and Rockefellers, was not voted on by all the states. It was only voted on by 3 or 4 states, and then all of a sudden they claimed that it was ratified by 2/3 of the states in the United States, and therefore it was a law, which it never was, which means that the income tax, which has been ruled by the Supreme Court, was never constitutional and ruled it unconstitutional. And a guy by the name of Tom Pryor and his lawyer, Larry Beecraft, that I know down in Alabama, fought the case in Louisiana in 2005 and beat the IRS because Tom Pryor was a lawyer and he refused to pay taxes due to the fact that he didn't perform any type of labor to get the money he got, because income is actually defined as money derived from investments. So if you took money you made digging a ditch and go invest it in Wall Street, the only money you owe taxes on is the money you get from Wall Street from your investments, not from physical labor. And Larry Beecraft and I have been in touch for years, writing letters to the IRS saying, show us where we're liable for the income tax if we do labor. If you go into work, or if you produce your radio program, or if you go do any type of physical labor to gain your money, that's not gain. That's not income. That's not increase. That is called a direct trade for remuneration for pay. So it's non-taxable. It's only when you don't work to get your money, like investing, that it's income tax. Let's take a look at Section 3401C of the IRS Code, the definition of employee. The definition of employee for the IRS Code is a state or federal elected official, federal employee, or a corporate officer. So if you're none of those, you don't owe taxes. And if you don't make your money through investment, you don't owe taxes. So that's why we still have states today that don't charge a state tax, because they know that the income tax law was not properly ratified, Title 26 of the IRS Code. and it has no implementing regulations, which means that they have no real fines that they can fine you because it wasn't implemented. So, but I'm digressing here.
Appreciate that information as well. I mean, that's a lot to look into. I'd be very careful on any of that. You really have to know exactly what you're getting yourself into if you do decide to go that route. And some people choose to, and some people say, no, I'm just going to pay my taxes because I don't want to deal with that, because that is a lot to go through. So, but man, this is,
Well,
go ahead.
What you got to understand is the laws that are in the book don't apply to you. There's a thing called corpus delicti. Corpus delicti means that there has to be either injury, loss, or harm. Injury is if you get hurt. Loss is if property is damaged. And harm is if somebody berates you and defamates your character. And there has to always be a victim. Now, that is the only way to prove a crime is taking place. All these laws that are on the book were put on the book to fleece the American people to pay for the debt of World War I. Okay, and it was an agreement that was signed in 1933. So the income tax and even the courts and the laws that they wrote is really private code. Okay, it's what they call the Uniform Commercial Code. That's how the bankers steal the money from the American people through the court system. The lawyers in the bar system was never granted any authority by the Congress of the United States, never. And the bottom line is I've won two, not just one. Well, I've won more than two, but for driving without a license, because if you're involved in a traffic stop, traffic means engaged in commerce. A motor vehicle, according to 18 U.S.C. 31, means that a automobile used for commercial purposes. So all the laws that pertain to you having a license and driving pertain to commercial activity. So if you're pulled over and it says, oh, you were speeding back there, you just say, well, I was engaged commerce, for one, and secondly, this is not a motor vehicle. This is an automobile because it's not being used for commercial purposes, and the law doesn't apply to me. And I beat driving without a license in the state of New York for myself and for my sister, and I've had other cases which I refused to show up to court, and I sent them letters and court cases in my defense stating that I was engaged in commerce, and I'm not under your authority. And the truth is, if the American people understood corpus delicti and what the laws of the country was meant to do, it was meant to control us and to control our activities and to bring us out of our money. Is pretty much is what they're doing. They're stealing from us, and it's all because of agreements that the American government made secretly with the banks to pay back the reparations for World War I, or be repaid, including World War II. And I told you earlier that I did a show with our show, Unite for Justice, and where angels feared tread on Crusade Radio. We did a show with our partners in Colorado, who were part of Walls of Our Mind, with Red Beckman. And we talked to a lawyer by the name of Lawrence McDonald, or Larry McDonald. And Larry McDonald had a case where he was defending a guy, and the IRS had claimed that he owed him $1 million. So they found out that the definition of legal tender means money that was worth something, or money backed by gold or silver. And that is what is termed as legal tender. Well, they found this out, and they said, well, the money we're using is fiat currency. It's not backed by anything. It's just paper. So they went to the sheriff, and they told the sheriff that this man can't pay this money because they can't pay debt with debt. And basically, the sheriff went to the comptroller of the state and said, this guy can't pay the debt back because he doesn't have legal tender with which to do that with. Well, after that transpired, the IRS could not come into the state because of the 10th Amendment. And he couldn't come into the state and say, oh, well, this guy owes us money. And say, well, when you guys start printing legal tender, then he'll have to pay the debt. But because the money is worthless, how can he pay debt with debt? So people don't understand the facade, the illusion of the world we're living in. That we're not getting all the information. The technology is being hid from us. We're not dealing with legal tender or money. We're paying debt with debt. every statement you get is not a bill. It's a statement. It's just a statement of a transaction made in a book. And so, we're digressing from the Nibiru stuff too, but like I said, it's all linked together, and it all goes all back to the money situation. But everybody thinks that Kennedy was assassinated. Why? Why was Kennedy assassinated? Because he was going to get rid of the Federal Reserve. And who are the people of the Federal Reserve? Oh, they're the elitists who control the world, who are doing the satanic child sacrifices. They're the ones who are controlling the hiding of the technology from the American people. They're the ones responsible for the shortage of food in the world, and the starvation and the genocide of people. They're the ones who control the medical system in the United States that is keeping the cures away from the people, therefore also, killing us through the drugs when we already know B17 cures cancer. We also know that CBD, an extract of marijuana, kills cancer. It's all connected. And people don't see, the child pornography, the child pedophilia rings, all being connected to these same perverts. Now, they only make up 1% of the world's elite. And the people of this world, if they rose up today, they could take them out, and our world would change in a heartbeat. But, they don't do it. They fear. They're constantly through the media being led in fear. So what is Trump saying? That the media is biased, the media is fake, they're fake news. Oh, damn, he's right. So if you look at the connection, you connect all the dots, you'll see that everything in this world is being controlled through these people. And if we don't do something about them, if we don't release this technology, our world will never expand beyond its present Neanderthal stage. Is pretty much what it is. And I've worked on the technology, and I know it's capable. And we did a show on our show, and I read from a list of scientific publications like Scientific America and all those, on all these devices that they had where they could aim these microwaves at you and get you to hear their thoughts, or make you think you're talking to God, or make you think that, all these other things are going on. And guess what? You're not crazy. You are hearing voices, and they aren't voices from God if you don't have the euphoric feeling afterwards. But these devices were created, and I read from the list all these different devices. One device was sent out at airports to scare flocks of birds off because of the bird strikes that were being done, happening with jet aircraft landing or taking off from airports. And they would, these devices would send microwaves out, and they'd hit the ground somewhere near the flock of birds to make a sound and scare them off. And then other devices that they could bounce off a wall while you're walking. You'd hear birds singing, or you'd hear voices talking to you, and you think you're going crazy, but you're not. And these weapons exist. Why? Because they're in these technical journals. They even were showing devices that Russia had designed and built, and they'd give the date. I've got these lists. The date that they were in the journals, what page, what volume, yada, yada, yada. So the technology is out there to do a lot more than we think they can do. And they don't want this released to the earth because it means that their plan of reducing the population to 500 million people, like it says on the Georgia Guidestones, will be interrupted. Because then everybody would understand that there's no such thing as population overload or population explosion. No, it's not. You could take the entire population of the world as it is today, put it in the state of Texas, and still give everybody 1,500 square feet of land to live on, and still have room in the state of Texas, and the rest of the world to be empty. So,
I've heard that before.
Technology. Oh yeah, it's real. It's real. You just have to make sure everybody doesn't just jump up and down at the same time. Maybe throw the earth off its spin. I'm being facetious here.
Right.
As soon as the people wake up to the fact that something evil has a hold of the elitists of this world, and they're incommunicado with the Anunnaki, and that our military has good reason to fear that they are coming back, and that the technology that they have can not only probably stifle Russia, but also defeat these Anunnaki, might be a good thing. Okay? But the technology they're holding back is also in pharmacia and drugs and everything else is killing and causing massive genocide. You know how many people in the United States alone die every year of cancer? And who's responsible for that? It's the Rockefellers because they control the entire medical industry in the United States. It's not good business to have a cure for anything. We don't make money that way. And if they put this information out, people wouldn't be dying of cancer. Cancer lives in an alkaline body system. Lives in an acidic body system. If you get your pH in your body using baking soda or lemon juice or even vitamin B17, you can take it up to 7.2 and your body will never get cancer just by using baking soda. But hey, surgeons would be out of business. Chemotherapy, which they get a huge kickback on from the drug companies, would be out of business. And what do they want? They're Satanists. And Satan wants what? He hates humans. He wants them to die. And the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the global elite didn't get this idea about reducing the population on their own. They're in connection or contact with the Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki are who? The fallen angels. And who did the fallen angels take their orders from? Satan. So, yeah, we're in a spiritual battle. The technology you've heard about is real, but there's technology out there that's even more real. And if I can turn around to the head of the electrical department or Goddard Space Flight Center and say, hey, why don't we design a communication system by tagging quarks? It's popping in and out of reality, and then we can have instantaneous communications, and they come out a month later and saying, hey, we developed a transporter. Well, how did they do that? Very simple. They use quarks. So, one thing, if you go back to the Tower of Babel, and they said, we're going to build a tower to the heavens, to God. And God confused the languages. Why? Because he knew it was possible that anything in the minds of man could be. And man's got a great imagination. I know I did when I did the things that I did. But like I said, I don't know how I did a lot of things I did. And I think all of creativity is an extension of God. And if we're open to him, we're open to the impossible. And that's what we're in a plasma field. We are projected images of energy into a plasma field. And we can manipulate that plasma field any way we want, so long as we follow the laws of physics, which shows that there's an order to the universe. And that's an intelligent design. And that's what it's all about. And the evil that has come against us wants to destroy all that and destroy us. And we have to be at a point in our lives where we've got to say, well, what can I do? Well, I can do anything I want to do. Well, that's what makes America a great danger to these people, because we have so much freedom, which they're trying to curtail, and we're almost got that done. And we can't be stopped because nowhere else in the world do all the people have the ability to do whatever they want to do and however they want to do. And if they understand the key to creativity, they'll understand it's through our spirit. How many times have you personally thought, oh, I think I'm going to call my friend Bob today, and he calls?
All the time.
Okay? All the time. Why? Because we're connected. We're connected to our spirit, through the energy, through the flow of information, ideas, and things. I've said things, just coined phrases, like phrase, the more I know I don't know. And I see that popping up in different places all over the place, because people hear it and say, wow, that's profound, or wow, that's a good saying. I think so, things like that. So we're all connected. And it doesn't mean that, they pick up on what I say, but they have the same thought at the same time. Well, why? Because that's evolution, but it's in a spiritual sense. And like the technology, you can see its progression, and you can see what the capabilities are and what the next step is going to be. Why? Because it's progressive. That's why there's pi. Okay, that's why there's the Pythagorean theorem. That's why there are scientific mathematical probabilities. Even Einstein said, oh, well, we can do time travel. All of a sudden, people are seeing technology in older pictures and saying, well, that looks like a cell phone. Things of this nature. So, what are we capable of? It's only what we don't think we're capable of that we won't discover.
I like the way you put that. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. If you ever want to have me on your show, or I don't know if you're recording this, but the bottom line is,
Yes, it's being recorded. This is definitely going to go on. Absolutely. So this is great. This was incredible.
Okay, well, just tell your listeners, I think stopping them and stopping us is that we think we can't do something. Like Trump didn't think he was going to win, but he worked at it hard enough to where he won. And it may have saved us for a short period of time at least, before these globalists figure a way out of and the American people having pushed their will over them. And I can only say that you've got to believe. You got to believe in yourself. You got to believe, I'd say a higher being, I say God, I say Jesus, whatever. But you got to believe you can do something before you do it. And then you can do it. And if we don't do it, nobody's going to do it for us. And we've hired Trump to do the job, and he's the only person I've seen do what he says he's going to do. And I have hope. I still don't like some of the connections he's got, but so I'm not saying I voted for him. I was burnt when I voted for Bush, and I won't be taken as a sucker again. So I'm just going to hold a wait and see attitude. But I'm going to tell you this. Our will is stronger than anything they can bring against us. And if we do what we have to do, if we stand up when we see something go wrong or somebody do something wrong, if we stand together and stand in righteousness, there's nothing we can't accomplish. And there's even in my career, I found, the tasks are always impossible. But all big problems are a series of small problems. And as you eliminate each one of the small problems, the big problem goes away. And that's what we got to do. We've got to start eliminating small problems. Secret societies, like Kennedy wanted to do, they got him assassinated along with getting rid of the Federal Reserve. That's part of the problem. All the secret societies, that's the biggest problem. But take each of the secret societies one at a time and say, you did this, you did that, you're under the law, boom, you're gone. And soon our problems will start to dissipate. Of course, they'll always have plan B and C, but you got to expect that. Because our enemy is always planning ahead, and Americans don't even realize they're in a battle. And that's the sad part.
Walking zombies, absolutely. Yeah, this was great. We will definitely talk again. Also, ladies and gentlemen, check out leakproject.com and youtube.com/clandestine time lord. Mr. Cook, this is Rex Bear with Leak Project. I got your email. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Now, I don't know if the phone shows up unavailable. It's because I'm calling on Skype. So just so you know, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But I read through your email and I was just like, wow, this is wonderful. It would be an honor to speak with you. Would you be interested in doing a show with us?
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Are there are you aware of how many planets? Well, I read in the article that you weren't aware of how many planets that this second sun has. The second sun has 7 of its own planets.
I've heard that before.
Okay. You realize this came around during the time of Noah.
Is that what they referred to then in the biblical prophecies?
Yes. As a matter of fact, if you look in Revelations, it is known as wormwood. The Sumerians called it, of course, the destroyer. There's a lot more to it. I used to be on a co-host for a radio station where angels fear to tread on Crusade Radio with the person, Doug Millar, and we worked with former FBI head of the Los Angeles branch of the FBI, Ted Gunderson, in uncovering a lot of satanic worship and a lot of people involved in child trafficking, the stuff that's coming out now in New York, how they just rounded up over 300 people doing that stuff. But basically, I worked for MIT down in Boston. I worked on quite a few satellite projects, Astro C, Astro D, and what you call Chandra. Chandra used to be known as what was known as AXAF. I designed the helped design the focal array. I was a mechanical designer for MIT, and I worked also on SOHO, Solar Heliospherical Observatory, and SDO, Solar Dynamic Observatory, both satellites to study the sun. One's parked in an orbit that's gravitationally equal between the Earth and the sun, which is SOHO, and it's parked in that permanent orbit. I worked on the LASCO portion of that satellite. But I also worked on SDO, Solar Dynamic Observatory. I worked at Goddard Space Flight Center, except my role was to design all the hardness and cables to hook it to the ground test equipment so we could verify that the science was correct on it. And I documented the engineering unit on those. So I'm also up on a lot of stuff going on with Nibiru and the biblical implications of what Nibiru is and what it represents to mankind and to the earth, and the stuff that's coming upon us, we're beginning to see it now. And a lot of things you covered in your article, I was really impressed with, or your YouTube video. The fact that you understood this electrical exchange between the two planets, because a lot of people still believe that the sun is fusion or fission, and that's not the case. It's electrical, dynamic in nature. So, yeah, I wouldn't mind discussing these things with you. But what do you know of the Nephilim?
Okay, so the Nephilim obviously have been talked about in biblical prophecies and scripture, and there's a lot of speculation how big they are. And I know a decent amount. I've talked to L.A. Marzulli a couple of times, actually several times, and enough to discuss them. Absolutely.
Okay, now are you familiar with the Book of Enoch?
Yes, the Book of
Or
Enoch, 100%. Yeah, the Watchers.
Okay, exactly. Well, the Watchers were specified that they actually came to Earth from the seventh planet of Nibiru, or Nibiru. Some people call it Nibiru. I call it Nibiru. But the bottom line is, if you follow the biblical prophecy, the number 7 equates to, you've heard the term seventh heaven. But the bottom line is that Nibiru is where the Anunnaki come from, or the Watchers. And basically, this all ties back to scientific stuff I worked on. Basically, I worked on the satellites that actually showed Nibiru coming in. The LASCO portion of that satellite, which was featured in the movie 2012, in the first, I think, 15, 20 minutes to show film clips from the LASCO portion, which is to study the mass coronal ejections, or the CMEs, coronal mass ejections from the planet. And I also worked on that focal array too. So basically, the satellites I worked on actually proved that Nibiru is coming in because they've actually are on those photographs, which NASA has since scrubbed. But even Hubble was being used to watch its approach, and it was locked and sealed, so nobody can get into it except for certain scientists. So NASA's now coming out and beginning to confirm this, but it's like, wow, it's too late to protect most of the people on the face of the earth. And you're well aware of the globalist plan to depopulate the earth, and the bottom line is this is just part of it all. So I've been watching this thing very closely, and from a scientific point, I studied the things about Nibiru for a good 3 years before I even started to release information on it, even on our radio show. But when I did, it started getting out there, and people started waking up to it. And being the fact that I worked on and off for NASA since 1988, kind of drove home the point that this is no joke and could be quite dangerous for the planet. It is going to be quite dangerous for this planet.
What you shared with me, can I put this on the record?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is some very intense information, and Ted Gunderson, it was in 97 that he exposed the chemtrail /weather war agenda, correct?
Correct. he also uncovered a what's coming out now. I don't know if you know, the Queen of England has an arrest warrant out for child pedophilia, and the death of, I think it was about 20 Native children. We did this on our show from Canada, and they were using for ritualistic sacrifice, satanic ritual sacrifice. It's all part of the New World Order and the covering up of the information about Nibiru, and the fact that NASA was hiding information about the approach of Nibiru. But also, it came down to they believe, well, they are satanic, so their destruction of the population is part of the satanic movement. But what this all boiled down to is that Ted Gunderson, who was part of our organization, which is Unite for Justice, we're very much following all these accounts and things that are going on. And we've tied it all together to realize that everything that's going on now, except for Trump, he's a wild card. Everything that's going on now was basically written in the Bible of things that would transpire, and especially in Revelations, as per the large hailstones that will hit the earth, all these not black holes, but the solar holes. I can't think of the name. The sunspots are basically the more occurrence of those, the greater are weather changes and earthquakes, which you pointed out in your information, is being caused on the earth, plus HARP being used to cause devastation. I think the chemtrails actually go back to them trying to obscure the sky enough so we don't see what's really coming. And it will obscure a lot of these things before they hit the earth and cause a greater toll of life lost on this planet. As you know, as the earth spins, there's a bulge of water at the equator. So if the earth gets knocked off its hinges or its axes, that water's got to go someplace. So that means a lot of the coastal cities are going under, big time. And depending upon where the earth comes back up on its axis will depend where that bulge of water will reform. And some are talking about the earth not rotating for a couple of days. So there's a lot that I've discovered in my journey, and along with Unite for Justice and Ted Gunderson, that all pertains to all these end time events that we are coming into. And a lot of the instruments I worked on, AXAF, which is now, you know it as Chandra, I helped develop that focal array for that. And you're talking, Chandra is an X-ray telescope. And basically, you have to bend the X-rays in a certain way in order to get them onto the focal plane, which is a good distance from the lens itself, which is actually not really a lens. It's just a way to...
We lost you. Are you there?
Yeah. What happens is the lens on AXAF, which is actually now called Chandra, and you understand where the name Chandra came from. Chandra is the Indian goddess. Okay, so you get the connections.
It happened again. We got dropped again. This is this is hilarious.
Okay, where'd you lose me?
I'll tell you, you must have been talking about something pretty interesting for these guys to do it twice in a row. We get into some real controversial topics here, but
well, they used to do it to our program all the time.
Okay,
and,
they did. They did it to your
times.
program all the time when you were with Ted?
Yep. Well, Ted had already passed away by the time I joined the group. Well, no, actually, I spoke to him on a couple occasions, but I was brought into Unite for Justice and the Crusade radio program where Angels Fear to Tread by Doug Millar, who was great friends with him. My sister was friends with his daughter, and she had actually traveled to Israel, where she stayed with her in Israel. But so I've been in this organization. I've been part of MIT Center for Space Research, and I've been up on this conspiracy stuff since then. As a matter of fact, MIT got quite PO'd at me for doing the things I was doing. But I I had to keep on keeping on because, we're in danger. So, but to get back to Chandra, it costs $90,000 just to machine it. And what it does is there's a certain way that focal ray is designed to focus X-rays. If you were to take an X-ray and put a 45 degree and expect it to bounce off that 45 degree and then go to the imager, it wouldn't do it. It'll pass right through that object. So you have to deflect the X-ray in a certain way to get it to go to the focal point on the satellite. And I helped design the focal array so it would do that. It was actually designed by an engineering person that I was working with. And they couldn't conceptualize it. They couldn't put it down on paper, so that the machine shop, which was done by, I think it was Boston University, I want to say, they had a 5-axis machine that they machined it with. But basically, what you have to do is you have to kind of like deflect the X-ray. You can't directly. You have to. It's hard to explain. The array itself was an incredibly complex piece of machinery, machining actually that actually helped develop it. But the AXAF was only one part of it. And I thought AXAF was supposed to be searching for sources of certain X-rays, because only certain types of X-rays will escape a black hole. Originally, I thought that's what they were going to use it for looking way out into the universe. But actually, that's not what they were going to use it for, as now that a lot of images come in of Nibiru. But both, you have to ask yourself this question. Now, I worked on SDO about 2005, but before that, I worked on SOHO back in the late 80s. Now, SOHO is a really great piece of equipment, and SDO is even greater in its clarity. But you got to ask yourself, why did they design 2 satellites to study the sun, unless they designed those satellites specifically for the approach of Nibiru? I mean, one would be enough. I mean, the science coming from both of them is astronomical. So there's the reasoning, I think, behind that is because so many things are taking place with the sun that they're really trying to choreograph, and I don't know if that's a proper word for it, choreograph what is going to happen to the sun. Even the axis of the sun is tilting because of Nibiru. So there's a lot of things going on that they're just trying to blame on global warming, and the people who are aware as you and I are as to the extent of what's going on understand that we're going to have a life-changing event in our faces in a very short period of time.
Did they give you some safe zones?
Well, not necessarily. Basically, just the fact that they're scrubbing everything from LASCO to portion of SDO to SOHO to our space telescope tells you that they're not going to allow this information out. And I don't think because of them. I think it's the upper echelons of the administration that are doing this. And I believe they're being governed by what they can and can't say because of the purse string type of scenario being used against them. In other words, you keep your mouth shut or you won't get any more funds from us. And MIT, when I was there, they were being threatened too, because it was during the Clinton administration. And let's just say this, I ended up in the hospital for a week.
Would they poison you or something?
Yep, they did. It almost killed me. An assassin was sent to take me out. And it did happen. And here's what happened. A guy